Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. Guys, a fun day yesterday. It was great to be back down at Acrisure Stadium for the opening game for Pitt football against Kent State. A victorious day, a 55-24 victory. Lots of good things that happened yesterday, some bad things that happened yesterday, things that need to be corrected. But before we get into the episode, guys, and then also, too, I'm going to go over one thing before the podcast really starts, before we go into it, because when it needs to be addressed, I've seen it enough, and I'm going to be honest with you, it kind of bothers me a little bit, something that Pitt fans did yesterday, and we'll go into that before we really start this whole thing. But the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Guys, as always, before we get on to the tailgates, before you head down to Acrisure or it's in a road game and you're at your house just throwing a party for Pitt, make sure you stop and see my friends at Colonial Beer, run by two great Pitt men. I can tell you this, they're incredible people. But more importantly, supporting small business is always the way to go, especially, too, when they have something to do with Pitt, especially two great Pitt men. Overall, they have a huge selection. You guys have seen me post the pictures on X. An incredible selection when you're in there. Obviously, the Icy Light Pitt cans are going through the roof. They've been going out in and out of there pretty quickly, but obviously they have restocked them. Also, too, when you're in there, go ahead and get a 6-pack of the Fake Slide Pilsner, which is the preferred drink of the Pitt Panthers. Obviously supports Alliance 412, which is a preferred collective of the University of Pittsburgh. Again, guys, go see Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Before we get into it, guys, as always, WRW Pitt, smash the like button and subscribe. If you are on YouTube watching this, hit the subscribe button, pretty easy. Share it with your friends. The channel continues to grow. If you're on Twitter, head over to YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the like button below. Pretty two simple things that help the channel grow at a rapid rate. Again, some really good questions in for WRW Pitt, as always. Pittman Zach, I was concerned with PJ O'Brien, gave up 2 TDs and the botched fumble with Mumfield, 21 points right there. That Pitt wounded themselves on. And we'll talk about that and why that actually helps a person like, for instance, the Pitt defense, how it actually played better than what we actually think it did. I actually watched the game last night when I came home. I was up till roughly about, after that game ended, I went back and it's nice to put it on the big screen, look at everything. It was nice. I finished that up about 3 a.m. last night, then watched it again this morning, just wanted to get my thoughts. And guys, I can tell you this, plenty of different notes from that game, watching it. Also, I did watch the Cincinnati game. I went over that one as well. We'll dive into a lot of the tape that we talked about, but great question here from Pittman Zach. Eric Rogers, one of the many people I got to meet yesterday. JJ, thanks for the conversation yesterday. You're the best. Hail to Pitt. Eric, it was an incredible conversation. It was nice to meet everybody, but it's just great to meet in person. I wasn't able to do the Permanis get-together this year, just with my crazy work schedule, my younger brother getting called up to the majors, the travel schedule. It was wild, but I'm hoping to do something to be able to meet everybody, maybe even before a Pitt game as well. But obviously, if you don't know about it, if you are an Alliance 412 member in any level, there is a Pitt tailgate at Southern Tier before the West Virginia game. I will be there. I'll be really happy to meet you guys, have one-on-one conversations, meet you guys. Thank you guys for supporting this podcast, which I'm beyond thankful for everything that you guys do. This podcast has blown up. The Sunday conversation is something I look forward to every Sunday, along with you guys, because of the great questions that you guys currently just deliver every week. It just really goes to show, and I always tell people, college football is great. I love college football more than the NFL. And I think and the reason why is because just the great people at Pitt, and that just makes it a lot more fun. The ACC fans that follow this, it's been incredible. So thank you guys. And Eric, it was great to meet you guys all yesterday and such a great conversation. Guys, before we get into it, though, the one thing that I wanted to talk about first that really bothered me yesterday, and I'm not going to answer any questions on this. I'm just going to say this because it's a fact. And I'm not going to take any questions on this. I'm just going to tell you how it is. During yesterday's Pitt game, I was really bothered by some Pitt fans. And I want to say it's a very small portion very small portion of the fan base that did it. It was very faint. It wasn't a lot. But the one thing that really pissed me off yesterday was the small portion of fans that booed Kenny Pickett and his highlights on the Jumbotron yesterday. And I'm gonna go on a rant here real quick before we get into it here tonight. If you are in that small contingent of Pitt fans that booed Kenny Pickett, who won an ACC title, has possibly almost every record in the book close up to Dan Marino in terms of quarterback stats and what he was able to do here at Pitt, you are not a Pitt fan. Got news for you. It's bullshit. And that's putting it lightly. You can complain about anything else when, the Pickett experience up with the Steelers, in which then again, too, we had Matt Canada as an OC, Mike Tomlin as a head coach, two guys that are, Matt Canada should never been working in the NFL. Mike Tomlin is a failed person in terms of coaching when it comes to developing young talent. We've seen that over and over again, but also, too, how they handle the entire thing. And here we are a year later. Steelers sites love to still hit on Pickett and whatnot. I wish they would focus on the current quarterback room for the Steelers as it's an absolute joke. Russell Wilson sucks. Justin Fields sucks. It's an absolute mediocre quarterback room, but it's an absolute mediocre football team. And if you think Kenny Pickett was the reason why the Steelers sucked, why has the Steelers won they've won a playoff game? What? The last time was in 2016. Kenny Pickett became the quarterback of the Steelers in 2021. So what's the excuse there? If you booed Kenny Pickett yesterday on the Jumbotron, and he wasn't there, but I showed his highlights, you're an absolute disgrace. And I really would wish that you wouldn't root for Pitt anymore. That's just soft. It's absolutely blatant. It's just disregarding what he's done for the university, donates to the university, supports the university, this football team, and actually has won important, meaningful games for Pitt. And because your faithful little Steelers suck, you think it's because of him? When the Steelers have a losing record this year, we'll come back and we'll have a conversation again. And that's with a better O-line and a better offensive coordinator. So if you did that yesterday, you need to reevaluate who you are as a man or a woman and figure out what your priorities are, because that shit was ridiculous. While it was only a small contingent, I know the Steelers sites love to hype it up and talk about how it's a ton of people. It was not, but I did hear it, and that was ridiculous. You should not be a Pitt fan if you booed that. Blatant stupidity, which sometimes dawns on Pitt fans a lot. So I'm going to leave it at that. Beyond happy that I clapped and everyone in our section and especially the student section, the Panther Pit, all cheered and clapped. And the majority of fans around the stadium clapped. But you got to have those dumb Steeler fans in there that try to ruin everything. So just wanted to put that out there and appreciate everything that Kenny Pickett's done. And for someone that knows what happened during the back scenes of really what happened with Kenny Pickett leaving the Steelers, I'm a Kenny Pickett supporter. And there's a reason why I'm not a Steelers fan. And also, too, why I don't root for anybody in the NFL besides the Patriots. I root for them a little bit, but at the end of the day, I root for every NFL team with a Pitt guy on it. So that's enough of that. Let's head back into the actual stuff here, why we're here, talk about Pitt. Jim Diller, with us losing by 6 to Cincinnati with last year's abysmal offense, is it wrong to be confident about our chances this year? Jim, I'm confident because, one, Cincinnati's going to be missing a lot of guys. If you guys remember, Dante Corleone, the All-American defensive tackle for Cincinnati, is out indefinitely. He's still recovering from blood clots. I don't expect him to be back this week. He wasn't back last week. I would think he's probably maybe back in the middle of the season. He's not there, and I do believe from people that I've talked to in the coaching circles that they're still missing about 3 or 4 more guys in that defense as well, which we'll go into a lot of the numbers with Cincinnati and why they struggled yesterday on defense. Gave up a ton of rushing yards. Towson was able to pass the football. Obviously you can imagine Cincinnati was able to throw the football and run the football. Pitt's going to be able to really have to show again they can stop the run like they did this week. And we'll dive into a lot of that stuff here as we go into it. First things first, wanted to talk about this as we get into it here. Pitt beats Kent State 55-24. Watching this game back over again, you guys saw I put out tweets about guys whose stock is rising. And we're going to go through the good stuff first. For instance, the stock of Cade Bell is going through the roof. One of the things that you love to see yesterday, and just going into the stats here, this is a beautiful thing right here. Through passing, Eli Holstein, the official stats came in. I said it was 29 of 39. They actually had one more pass in there for him. It was 30 of 40, which is 75% completion percentage, 333 yards passing. That's an 8.3 average. Would have never expected to see that shit last year. 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. I thought Eli, for his first college football game, played an outstanding football game. There's still things he needs to correct. Certain passes, obviously, he threw an interception off his back foot. He talked about after the game in his post-game press conference about why it was important to throw the ball out of bounds and not trying to make that throw, or really throwing it on a line where it's not going to the corner of the end zone. He's really running a slant route back to him where he should have thrown a little bit harder. But in reality, he said he probably would have thrown it out of bounds to live to fight another day. That's called maturity and understanding, hey, I don't need to make an outstanding play every single time and every single play on the field. Sometimes if it's not there, throw it away to live another down to where we're not turning the ball over like that. Also, too, he had a couple passes that were really in terms of almost being intercepted. He had one in the end zone again. Luckily, the guy dropped it. Had one heading down the other way before there was a field goal by Ben Sauls. That one gets taken back a little bit. But, as a redshirt freshman, you guys are starting to see why this guy's a starting quarterback, and there is no more quarterback competition. He is the guy. And, a lot of fans were just really, and even some reporters were hitting me with, this isn't a quarterback battle. Pitt would go against everything it's done in terms of who they're starting. I said it would be a quarterback battle because of things and information that I knew. But when you're 3-9 last year, every position is up for competition. And when you look at Cade Bell, how he was able to get people open, the decision-making of the majority. When you look around, just how well Eli Holstein was able to make quick decisions, get the ball out, find the player, but also, too, the Cade Bell offense puts people into space. When you look at this team, okay, obviously the rushing yards, people talked about rushing. Oh, is Desmond Reed's game going to go to the next level? And again, I understand we faced Kent State yesterday, all right? Last year, like I told you guys the stats before, while, they have 2 all-MAC wide receivers, this is still a team that was ranked 133 out of 133 last year. Just putting that out there. But Desmond Reed, 14 carries. And we talked about this too. There's another question. Well, they love to throw the football. This offense loves to throw the football under Cade Bell. Will they ever run the football? What's it going to look like? Is it going to be 50-50? They threw the ball 40 times. Well, I guess with Nate Yardnell, 48 times. They ran the ball 32 times. So it's a little more, almost in that 60-40 range of pass to run. But Desmond Reed, 14 carries for 145 yards, 10.4 average with 1 touchdown. Daniel Carter had himself a good day, 4 carries, 28 yards, 7 yards per rush. Derek Davis, he had 5 carries for 12 yards. A couple of those runs, if they didn't get to count because there was a couple penalties. He ran hard, he ran violent. I love to see that. I think Derek Davis's stock continues to rise. I think Daniel Carter has a real chance to provide some real opportunities this year. Those 3 guys. I think those 3 guys are at the top right now in terms of getting carries. You love to see how hard they run. Desmond Reed is just electric, provides a lot of speed, but also, too, he's a guy you can go right in between the tackles with. When I reviewed the tape, it was so nice to see Desmond Reed not fall down on the first inkling of contact. He was able to establish contact and then fall forward. Multiple gains. Again, 10.4 average. He had a 49-yard touchdown run, had a punt return, bounced off a defender, was able to do a spin move while getting hit, returned a punt return, which was incredible, electric. That was great. So it was really nice. Overall, 201 yards rushing. When you can establish the ground game like anything else, you're going to have a very successful day, along with it being able to complement how they threw in the passing game. 366 yards overall between Eli Holstein and Nate Yarnell. Nate Yarnell was 4 of 8, 33 yards and a touchdown. So he did well. Overall, that was beautiful to see. But then let's dive into this right here. This is what you love to see, the Pittsburgh Panthers receiving yards, okay? Kenny Johnson in one damn game. And I told you guys all offseason, this kid's going to have a great year. He's a future NFL wide receiver. But this guy in one game almost replicated his 2023 total stats. Kenny Johnson, 7 receptions for 105 yards. It's a 15-yard average. 1 touchdown catch, almost had a couple touchdown catches, a nice 48-yard reception down to the 1 yard line. Tremendous job there. Century Lee, 6 catches for 72 yards. And what's crazy is Kenny Johnson and CJ Lee were 2 guys that were really out the majority of fall camp due to injuries, nagging injuries. They're both back 100% healthy, and we're going to need them this year. And they played a hell of a football game on Saturday. So Century Lee, 6 catches, 72 yards. And ladies and gentlemen, the usage of the tight end. Gavin Bartholomew almost totaling what he did last year. Gavin Bartholomew, 5 catches for 66 yards and 13.2 yards per average. 5 receptions yesterday. That's a career high for Gavin Bartholomew. It's only game 1, which was beautiful. And you also saw schematically where I can tell you guys personally, they only used about 30 to 35% of their playbook, which was beautiful. They didn't show really anything. It was dink and dunk there for the beginning portions, and then Eli Holstein couldn't help himself, had to rip it 50 yards downfield, which was a beautiful throw. You didn't really see a lot, but what you did get to see is schematically being able to put people in position to get open. Numerous times you saw Konate Mumfield get open, create space through a number of different plays. I might be able to bring it up here on my X account. I retweeted a play that Dominic, who's a reporter for the SI Pitt Panthers, schematically, there was a great play by K. Bell that he called, which was really in reality basically a running back screen. It was really 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, but it's a fake. But being able to have Gavin Bartholomew cut up, go down the sideline where he's just wide open by himself, creating opportunities and creating players in space. You'd love to see it. Numerous opportunities where you saw yesterday where guys were open. Guys are open all the time. How many times last year or even the last 2 years, were there contested catches, guys that weren't open for Pitt? You're seeing guys now that are wide open, creating space, but also, too, between Konate Mumfield, C.J. Lee, Raphael Poppy Williams, Dejon Reynolds, Kenny Johnson, there's separation. These guys are being coached harder. They're being coached within the film room, understanding what they're looking for, timing routes, understanding how they're running those routes. It's a full circle type of moment, a 180 when you look at this offense. And, and again, I thought the offensive line for the majority of the game played well. There's a couple drives at the end of the second quarter and the beginning of the third quarter where they had a couple sacks in a row. Branson Taylor, for the majority of the game, he had a good game. He had a couple iffy plays, back-to-back sacks. I think that he'll get that certainly corrected out. Again, guys, it's week 1. You're going to have mistakes. I expected mistakes, but also, too, I actually expected more mistakes. You didn't see any procedure penalties. I mean, for the first game of the year, in my mind, I really had this offense coming out. I expect to see false start penalties. I expect to see procedure penalties, getting lined up. You didn't see that stuff. That's a hell of a job coaching. I mean, last year, we were running an offense where we were snapping the ball every 20 seconds. We couldn't get guys lined up. We had snap infractions. We had delay of games. No delay of games. No snapping infractions. You didn't see any of that stuff yesterday. That's called players buying in, but that's great coaching. That's something completely different than what we saw last year. So that's a major plus. I would like to see the offensive line be more consistent, more aggravation, more violence, especially, too. They were able to create major spaces in the running game. When it came to the passing game, they had a number of great pockets, a little bit of pressure here and there. You'd like to see the consistency more there. But you're going to see this offensive line really start to gel together. Branson Taylor, Ryan Jacoby back from last year. He's back. At center, Lyndon Cooper, I thought he had a hell of a day. I thought B.J. Williams continues to show why he's a true sophomore and a starter like he was last year. Raw talent, but he's starting to contain that raw talent and show the basics, but also, too, the technique, his footwork, his punch, being able to create leverage, how he's able to drive people off the ball, moving his opponent somewhere where he doesn't want to go. That's the old Bill Fralick adage. Move a man. There's nothing better in this world as an offensive lineman than moving one man from one place to another against his will. That's called kicking someone's ass. That's what it's called. B.J. Williams had himself a day. Also, Ryan Bayer was able to do a great job yesterday, being able to pick up on pass protections, blitzes, understanding where those are. I love to see it yesterday. So overall, there was a couple drives where Pitt didn't move the ball a little well. I think those get corrected out. But when you look at an offense that's completely brand new, besides a couple passes here and there, you make the adjustments there. You ran 30, 35% of your playbook. That's a hell of a day for your offense to score 55 points. And what? 366, 456, 566, 575 yards of total offense. God, that's beautiful. You can't ask for more than that. You had a penalty. Obviously, you had a penalty yesterday on, I think, a couple penalties on special teams, but special teams looked a lot better. Jacob Bronowski doing a great job. He'll clean up a lot of that other stuff with, the block in the back. Pat Narduzzi talked about how, and again, I kind of didn't agree with this with Pat Narduzzi. He talked about how, penalties, won't ruin a game. I don't agree with that. Penalties will certainly ruin a game. But the one thing I did agree with him with about penalties, if they're an aggressive penalty, I'm okay with that, because that means that guy's playing fast. If he's playing fast, he knows what he's doing, and it moves forward. That's what you love to see. Now, on the defensive side of the football, let's just say P.J. O'Brien did not have a good day. And, we're viewing the film to get an idea. A lot of Pitt fans were like, the defense, I thought it played bad yesterday. Let's really review how many points. Konate Mumfield tried to get a bounce ball on special teams. That related to a fumble. That fumble goes right back. They take it for a touchdown. So defense only gave up 17 points. The first touchdown of the game, which was P.J. O'Brien, especially too, when they're going down the seam. Obviously, Pitt plays quarters defense. P.J. O'Brien, he's recruited to play that position. You saw it last year in the beginning of the year. P.J. O'Brien struggled. You saw a 15-yard face mask penalty last year. Last year against Cincinnati, he had penalties where it was a late hit. That kind of stuff early in the season comes back to him. In the first touchdown of the game, he's on the wrong, really, in terms of just his angle was horrible. Created a wrong angle, was a little bit of deception. I thought he was a little bit confused on what to go or where to go to. Took a bad step. Wide receiver makes a great move to the inside. Comes off the hash, goes towards the middle of the field, cuts up. P.J. O'Brien, by making a wrong step, tries to make it back, takes a horrible angle. Guy's there for a touchdown right over the middle. So that's strike one against P.J. O'Brien. The second touchdown that P.J. O'Brien, he really gets beat on going towards the end zone. When I went back and watched the film, that should not have been a touchdown. I'm a little confused on, I went back and I watched it 2 or 3 times. P.J. O'Brien was right. The ball was completely bobbled. He didn't have control, so it shouldn't have been a touchdown. But also, too, why wasn't it reviewed? It's a scoring play, so it should be reviewed automatically. And they should even show on the replay it was not a touchdown. The guy bobbled it. Even the announcer said, clearly he bobbled it there. So that should have been away. That should have been 7 points away from there. But they called it a touchdown. He gets beat there. The one thing that I think PJ needs to do, and obviously there's a lot of talk from PJ over the offseason, the safety room is very competitive right now. You've got Donovan McMillan, who had a turnover interception yesterday. Javon McIntyre, a guy who continues to play at a consistent level. I like what he's done. Really, those are my 2 starters there. But Cruz Brookins, man, he was everywhere. I mean, when he was in the game, he was around the football, aggressive, downhill, and just smashing people. When you have those 3 guys that are very, very good and competitive in that wide receiver room, the safety room, along with Jesse Anderson, you got to limit mistakes. You're to that point where it's not like there's only 1 or 2 guys, or maybe 3 guys, to where you're only rotating 3 guys. You've got 5 guys back there, man. You can't make those mistakes. And if you think about it, the 24 points that they scored, it's really based off of really 3 plays. You correct those 3 plays, Kent State maybe only scores 7 to 10 points, because really the one drive they had for a field goal, nothing, Kent State just went down the field. There's nothing you can do there. So those are 3 points they have there. So potentially 7 to 10 points. This is probably a 55-10 football game, and it works out. When you look at, for instance, the first portion of the game, the first half, they had -4 rushing yards. So I want to tell Pitt fans this. They had -4 rushing yards at halftime. The run defense is 10 times better than it was last year. I think people were a little bit complaining because they saw there's a couple big spurt plays. Guys didn't hold their lanes, especially when you come back after the third quarter, going into the third quarter after halftime. I think those first 2 drives were like, the game's almost wrapped up. We're good to go. We'll win this thing easy peasy. Pat Narduzzi talked about, hey, we'll get that stuff cleaned up because guys weren't staying in their lanes. But even when they were trying to run the football, the interior defensive line, Nakai Johnson had himself a hell of a day.
There was a number of times there was a double team trying to go on Nakai Johnson. Nakai Johnson made a swim move so fast, he went right into the backfield and easily made it 2 tackles for losses. I mean, the guy was able to move through that. That's how Pitt's defense should structure continuously through every year. I love how they do that because they're guys that are fast. Get right through the double team and go ahead and make a tackle for loss. I told you guys before, it's really good to watch Pitt's defense play vertical. It's a vertical style defense. We want to have tackles for losses. A Pat Narduzzi, Randy Bates defense is getting in your ass and getting behind the line of scrimmage to make plays. And you saw that a number of times yesterday. To get to their points here, Devin Cargman was 14 of 28. Almost less, or I guess right around 50%, maybe a little bit less than 50%. Only had 181 yards passing, 6.5 average, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. But at the rushing attack, guys, they had 31 yards rushing. Kai Thomas had 18 carries. Obviously there was a lot of Devin Cargman, I guess, off of sacks. Kai Thomas had 18 carries for 40 yards. That's a 2.2 average. That's kicking your ass. Curtis Douglas, 9 carries for 26 yards. They were a couple spurt plays here and there, but overall, the interior, Kai Johnson, Isaiah Neal, Anthony Johnson, Nick James, I thought they played a really good interior game. I think on the outside, the 2 guys that really stuck out to me, Nate Matlack had 1 tackle for, and it was a sack. I thought he did good. It wasn't nothing special. But the 2 guys at the defensive end position that really stood out to me were Jimmy Scott and Sincere Edwards. Let me tell you something. Jimmy Scott's going to be a special football player. He was coached up well in New York. I thought, people talk about New York football not being very good. I understand what they're saying, but Jimmy Scott's a talent. I thought he did really well yesterday. And if we look here at some of the stats here, if I can switch over here, that'd be kind of nice. Here's the offensive stats. Let's look at the defense here. You look at the defense here. Nakai Johnson, 3 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss. Jimmy Scott, 3 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss. Half a sack. Kyle Lewis, before we get into the linebackers, but you look at Sincere Edwards, his first step off the ball. I mean, he is going to be a special football player as well. I mean, he was in the backfield numerous times, causing havoc. One thing that was very certain is, people talked about, well, I don't think there's a lot of pressure. Well, in the beginning, I was saying the same thing, but when you go back and watch the tape, go look at where these throws were. They're 10 yards and in. So they're shallow throws. So basically what Kent State was doing is understanding, hey, we're not going to have a lot of time to throw the football. We need to get the football out very quickly. So when I reviewed the tape, it's not like they were throwing darts down the field. Go look at what were their spark plays. They didn't have any plays. I think maybe 1, if not 2, if I look at my notes here, maybe 1 or 2 of plays that were 10-plus yards. 1 or 2. The rest of them are within a 10-yard to less. Really 5 to 10 yards. When you look at the pressure, overall, I counted there were five sacks, but there were also 15 quarterback hits. I mean, that kid was hit. I mean, to the one point, the kid got up so slowly, I almost felt bad for him at one point when watching the film. I'm like, man, this kid's just getting crushed. So overall, there actually was a number of pressure. Could there be more pressure, more consistency, especially, too, when you look into that third quarter? Even Pat Narduzzi said those first couple drives out of the third quarter when it was a 28-21 game, that shit shouldn't happen. It was almost like they came out and said, hey, our offense is going to score 100 points, so we're just going to, we're going to win this thing. Then after that, you saw Pitt's defense really start to take over from there. Because in the first half, really, Pitt's defense only gave up, 7 points? They only gave up 7 points on defense. The other 7 points came from the Mumfield fumble. They scored 14 points in the first half, 10 points in the second half. You clean up those little mistakes, it's not a big deal. I think those are correctable issues. Interior, I love it. I would like to see more developed depth on the outside. I think that Nate Matlack will really blow up as the season goes on. I think he's going to be really good. But overall, when you looked at it, and Chief Borders had a sack, you go through the tackles here. Kyle Lewis, 10 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. 10 total tackles, 2 solo tackles, 1 sack. Rasheem Bile, 7 tackles. Brandon George, 7 tackles. Braylon Lovelace, 5 tackles. Key Thompson, 5 tackles. You just love hearing it. So in that top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the top 5 guys, the top 5 tacklers on this football team is the linebacking core. Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Brandon George, Braylon Lovelace, and Key Thompson. How good has Key Thompson been playing? The guy's, he's an all-MAC player, first-team all-MAC out of Ohio University. One, for starters, they reviewed the tape where they said he dropped the interception. I looked at the tape. I didn't see where he dropped it. I don't know. I thought that was a little questionable. I didn't see how that was possible. But, Donovan McMillan ended up getting an interception anyways. But overall, those top 5 guys, that's a deep linebacker room. Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Brandon George, Braylon Lovelace, Key Thompson. And then who else you got in there? Down here, you got... And then Jordan Bass had a tackle in there. Well, he's played as well. 6 linebackers that were just playing at a high level. And guys, I'm going through this right now. I'll be able to answer your questions here. I see them lining up in the question bar here. Really good overall football game. The one thing also, too, the linebacker room is deep. I love that room. It's full of young guys, but very aggressive guys. Guys that were able to make a lot of tackles for loss, sacks. That was good to see. But one thing I would like to see a little bit more is also, too, the depth. The question mark I have, the depth of defensive end, but then the depth of cornerback. Rylan Gandy is clearly your number 1. Taman Lynham is clearly your number 2. Rashad Battle did good to certain portions of the game. There were some question marks, especially, too. He was getting picked on, especially in the beginning of the third quarter, where they were running slant routes and they were just beating him on the inside. I think he's going to get better. He's a guy that's finally healthy to where I think he starts to get better. He just needs more reps. I think that's all he really needs. But you got to start to wonder, hey, let's get some depth there. Rylan Gandy and Taman Lynham are really your top 2. When I looked at the tape, I thought those 2 were easily your top 2 corners, no questions asked. And then Rashad Battle would be easily your third. I think all 3 of those guys are certainly physical. They love playing that press coverage and the quarters defense. I thought they did a really good job. But after that, you'd like to see some more guys out there. What does Noah Bigelow look like? Jeremiah Anglin, from the 4-star Kentucky transfer. The more he gets to play, obviously in this defense with being a first-year guy, he'll be able to play better. I think he's going to be a tremendous football player. Same thing with Tamarian Crumpley, another guy that gets another look. Overall, I think when you look at that room, you're going to start to see more and more guys step up, but they got to develop more depth. And also, too, you saw a number of different guys throughout that football game yesterday for Pitt that they played a lot of guys. I think some guys played themselves into a starting position, and there's some guys that played themselves out of a starting position. I don't think P.J. O'Brien's going to be starting at Cincinnati. I think it's going to be Donovan McMillan, Javon McIntyre, and then Cruz Brookins getting a lot of looks in there. I think there's going to be, P.J. O'Brien will get his looks for sure. They're not going to just abandon him. I think he's a guy who's a ball hawk. I think he's a guy, once he just gets familiar with it and gets just more repetitions in the game, he'll start to step up. Hopefully it's just quickly. But I think the top 3 guys in that room are, Donovan McMillan, Javon McIntyre, and Cruz Brookins. So, when you look at the depth portions of it, cornerback and defensive end, you want to see more depth there. I think that's where the question marks you see. But it was so good to see the amount of guys that played. Heck, Pitt got down to its 3rd string, 4th string defensive line. So, you saw those guys come in. You saw Jasir Whittington come in late in the game. You saw David Ajebi come in late to the game. You saw some of those guys step up in the late portions of that game. The same thing with the linebacker room. The second, somewhat of the 3rd-team offensive line came in. Nate Yarnell went into that football game. You saw some of the backups, especially the running back position. The major difference, especially, too, the defensive side of the football has always developed that 1st room, 2nd room, and 3rd room. You're 3 deep. The very big difference this year is the amount of depth being coached on the offensive side of the football on offense. Frank Cignetti, from numerous people that I've talked to, is that it was very separated. They were working in groups. Andre Powell, the running back room, was only really working Rodney Hammond and Sebo Flemister last year. The difference this year is that you saw all those guys getting developed. Desmond Reed, Derek Davis, Daniel Carter, Jules Goff, Montravius Lloyd. You got all those guys back there being developed. The wide receiver room being developed, not just the first 3 or 4 guys, but the 8 guys that are there that can play. You're also seeing the quarterback room I think if Eli Holstein went down, I would still feel safe with Nate Yarnell. A guy that was sitting on the bench the whole day comes in, goes 4 for 8, throws a tutty. I mean, you're starting to see the more depth get developed, but as we go into the season, I think you're going to see that too deep, where the guys that really played themselves into positions. And again, from what I said last time, this is Kent State. We're not facing Georgia. We're not facing Cincy. We're not facing West Virginia, even though they got absolutely obliterated yesterday. And, West Virginia fans always talk about Pitt fans and West Virginia fans travel. I got news for you. I watched a lot of that game in the second half because I got home because of the rain delay, which is pretty funny that it rained as bad as it did. God showered on just two rivalry programs that was pretty funny. But when I watched that game, man, there were thousands of Penn State fans at Milan Puskar Stadium. I mean, easily 5,000 to 10,000 fans. I mean, they traveled well down there. So that was one thing to watch down there as well. That's just the amount of white shirts that you saw. But we weren't facing Cincy or West Virginia, a P4 school. We weren't facing, Clemson, Florida State, Georgia Tech. We weren't facing Stanford, any of those teams. This is Kent State. So while a lot of this stuff looked really good, I think it's really good to be happy about it because it's a first-year offense. There were no procedure penalties, anything like that. And we could see something different in the second game. I don't think we will. But overall, it's just Kent State. We're going to find out what football team we have this week against Cincinnati, the River City rivalry. We're going now week 2 and week 3. We have back-to-back rivalry games. We're going to find out how good this football team is between Cincinnati and West Virginia, the backyard brawl when it comes back to Acrisure. Say what you want about Cincinnati being 3-9 last year. We were 3-9 last year, but these are two clearly different teams. Cincinnati, I think, is in a little bit more trouble. I think that they have a lot of issues. Dante Corleone is still out. Obviously, they're like I told you guys before, the box score from Towson. I'll be able to put that up on the screen. Carlos Davis, I mean, overall offense. Cincinnati's defense yesterday, people were concerned about, about Pitt's defense. I wouldn't be concerned about that. If I'm Cincinnati, I'm a little concerned. Cincinnati won yesterday 38-20, and they gave up a total 244, 344, 444. So 338 yards of total offense, 244 yards passing, 194 yards rushing to Towson. That's concerning. But on the flip side, you look at their offense, they rushed for 275 yards. So that's going to be something for Pitt. They have to stop the run. They're going to try to run the football. And, Pat Narduzzi beat Louisville in 2020 with Scott Satterfield there. But the next 2 times, Scott Satterfield has had Pitt's number. In Louisville, Pitt lost to Scott Satterfield in 2023, and then Pitt lost to, 2022, and then Pitt lost to Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati in 2023. So Pitt has to be able to stop the run, but overall, when you look at the numbers yesterday, when you look at these numbers, Pitt only gave up, putting it up here again, 31 yards rushing. Not a bad day at the office. And only 181 yards of passing yards. So a little over 200 yards of total offense. That's a good day at the office. Before I start moving on here, I'm going to answer some of these questions here. Let's see here. Overall, couldn't ask for more from the offense. Game 1, the route trees are night and day better than last year. The left side of the O-line was concerning at times. What are your thoughts? We went through that. Obviously, Ryan Jacoby and Brandon Taylor will get better. There were times, obviously, we talked about during the game, they're just, back-to-back sacks. That was a problem. I would like to see Eli Holstein step up in the pocket a little bit more, but he even talked about that. He talked about how, hey, I had that guy there. All I need to do was step up and boom, there I go. Konate Mumfield dropped a touchdown pass yesterday. Could have padded his stats a little bit more. I don't think that'll happen again, to be honest with you. Just Konate Mumfield is just a steady guy. I think it was just one of those rare games that just Konate Mumfield was not playing well. The fumble, the drop ball, but he did have a touchdown, in other places. He had a touchdown in that game. I think overall, he'll be able to be a guy just in those first game jitters, so he'll be fine. But the offensive line, I see continually getting better, and it's a continued progress of getting better. But guess what? We're going to find out if they get better next week as they go on the road for the River City rivalry. Steel Will Thanks for another show. Nice week 1 performance overall, especially offensively. Couldn't agree more. Thank you for the Pickett comments. Hail to Pitt. Yeah, Dan, again, not going to answer any more questions on it, but those are my thoughts. Amen about Pickett. Yep. Do you know someone who can create a cool 2024 hype video? VT has a cool one. All I could find is a 30-second trailer. PJ, I could ask a really good friend of mine, Oxen Writer. He has Ox Productions. I can maybe do something there. Maybe I'll do something about that. I posted the one from a couple, I think it was from 2022 or 2021 when Pickett was here, when we beat Clemson, which was a great crowd, 61,000 people. That was a lot of fun. That was so loud, too. I post that one a lot because I thought that was a great video. I think Ghost of Whip, people said, is the one that made that, but I like to pop that up every once in a while to get that going, and I'll probably post it again for the Backyard Brawl, so that'll be a fun one. Yeah, I thought that was weird. Why would Pitt fans be booing them? Found really odd. Yep. Preach, man. Said it happened, thought it was a joke and read online. Yeah, I know. Preach, brother. A little behind, but those fans booing Pickett was total bullshit. Yeah. Pickett, all-time pick, great. Period. Amen, Kevin. Nailed on Kenny. JJ, thank you, Eric. Steelwell, there's no reason for Pitt fans. There's no reason for Pitt to lose to Cincinnati. That team was in a barn burner with Towson and were projected one of the worst Power 4 teams this year. If Pitt wants to be decent, they have to win. Wolf HD, I couldn't agree more. And, I'll probably do recorded videos during the week. I'm actually going to do a recorded video maybe tomorrow on what I saw from Cincinnati. I'm going to watch more tape. I actually have to watch. You guys will probably think I'm a nerd or something with this stuff, but I just love watching game tape. And maybe in another life, I've had, and from my friends who are college football coaches, they tell me I should have went into coaching, which maybe in another life I will. But I'll go back. I got to watch the tape from the West Virginia game again. Got to go through that. But I'll watch the tape again with Cincinnati, and I'll probably do a recorded video on what to look for with Cincinnati. A nice little 15, 20-minute video to give you guys a little heads up. Maybe bring on a Cincinnati podcast person to where the people that cover Cincinnati, maybe bring them on, talk about, hey, what'd you see from Cincinnati? What's their pros? What's their cons? Stuff like that. We could do something like that. I'd like to get a recorded video for you guys on that to just give you some content during the week, obviously. So we'll be able to watch that. Also, too, we're at the 42-minute mark. I've been talking so much because obviously just I watched so much tape here in the last 24 hours. 350 people in here right now. Guys, down below, if you're here, please hit the like button. Hit the like button, but also, too, hit the subscribe button. We're really climbing at a certain rate. Post this to Pitt Panther Fanatics on Facebook. Post to your friends. And also, too, after this is done, after the video is done, post your comments and questions. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What you like about the offense? Things of that nature. I always like to read those, and I certainly comment back to a number of them. Not making any Steelers friends tonight. I see. Haha. Think you could like both. Appreciate what Kenny did for Pitt, and also knowing she didn't work out with the Steelers for a lot of reasons. Yeah, I agree, man. It did not take Desmond Reed long to silence the doubters. Nick, couldn't agree more. People, and a number of Pitt fans, were just complaining about, well, he's from Western Carolina. This kid can't play up here. Well, the first FBS opponent he faces, and I understand it's Kent State, but guess what? They're scholarship guys too. And it's the FBS level. Kent State's better than the majority of FCS teams. Unless you're like the Big 12 that almost loses to FCS teams, or if you're Houston that lost 21-7 to UNLV. So that's another one. Or Texas Tech almost lost to Abilene Christian. What was it, like 50 to 40? Was it 50 to 49 or something like that? Something outrageous. But Desmond Reed had himself a hell of a game. And he's going to be a big guy going forward, but you got to keep him healthy. That's my biggest thing. Johnson and Poppy are going to be really, really good. Poppy's a legit route runner. Adam couldn't agree more. You're seeing the speed. We knew about the speed from both those guys, but now you're seeing the next level of evolution between both of them, which is the route running. If you're good at that, you have speed, you have the route running, you're an NFL receiver. That's for sure. Don't matter how big you are. I can tell you that. And also, too, let's be honest. C.J. Lee and Raphael Poppy Williams are smaller guys. Didn't look like a problem yesterday. They caught the ball really well, and they were in space. Kenny Johnson for wide receiver 1. I think he's up there for wide receiver 1, and so is Konate Mumfield. I still think Konate Mumfield is a hell of a receiver, and we're lucky to have both those guys there with Raphael Poppy Williams, Dejon Reynolds, C.J. Lee. You got 5 guys right there that can play immediately. He looks different this year. Amen. I agree. Kenny Johnson looked really good. Mumfield, other than the drop TD pass and the botched punt return, looked pretty solid too. I agree. PJ, what are your thoughts on Matlack's performance and the defense holding back only 5 sacks versus Kent? I mean, at the end of the day, it's still 5 sacks. I mean, and we talked about this before, PJ. When you're running short routes like that, and clearly the plan against Pitt was to throw the short and intermediate game, under 10 yards because there was a lot of pressure on him. But what you saw was short routes. So they were getting the ball out quickly. You saw a couple times where the ball was thrown down the field. A couple of those touchdown passes were past the 20-plus yards. Besides that, there was really nothing else. I mean, they were clearly, and it was Kergman that really caught the ball, took a 2-step drop, and then just threw it up for grabs, a 50-50 ball. He had to get rid of the football. But you saw numerous plays across the board where we're like, damn, Pitt's getting after the quarterback. And Pitt's getting there quickly, 5 sacks. But you look at the number of pressures and hits. I mean, he was hit 15 times, if not more. I think it's pretty good overall. The people I talked to today as the Waterfront were very excited about the offense. I agree. Kyle Lewis hype is real. Nick couldn't agree more. He's going to be, I think, honestly, you look at him, man, he should be an all-conference linebacker this year. And there's a couple guys on there. Even Jordan Bass, who was, as a backup in the star position, played a hell of a football game. And speaking of the O-line, is Ryan Jacoby going to be ready to go Saturday? Saw he got dinged up toward the end of the game. Yeah, from what I can tell, he's A-okay. I thought he was fine. They got to remember, too, at the end of the game, I mean, they took out the majority of their guys. They took out the starting O-line and brought in the second and third team O-line as well. So a lot of guys played yesterday. Was there a holding call on the lineman yesterday? I cannot remember. A couple holding calls. Nothing to the point where it's like, 5 to 10. You know what I mean? You're going to have those holding calls, but it is what it is. As long as it's an aggressive one, but it wasn't egregious yesterday, so that wasn't a bad thing. My biggest thing it was in terms of the pass protection. Some of those guys, there were a couple bad plays here and there. Obviously, Jacoby, Lyndon Cooper had a couple plays. Same thing with Branson Taylor, but I think that stuff gets cleaned up with Jeremy Darvo. And the biggest thing is in week 1, you're finally facing another team. So when it's so nice to be able to have something else on tape besides facing your own team, you can really get critical on what your team looks like. So I think the game tape and the practice tape are 2 separate things. But today on Sunday, they had their film review. They had their team meetings. They looked at it. They corrected it. Now Monday, tomorrow, which the majority of us are off tomorrow, they're not. They go to, they're not going to have a practice tomorrow. But guess what? They're going to have their team meetings, and they're going to start to review for Cincinnati. So it'll be fun. That's a good thing. I think there was 1 or 2 holding calls, certainly not an epidemic. Exactly, Daniel, I agree. Let's see here. That QB took a beating. Adam, 100%. I heard Sincere Edwards' name a lot. We're going to have to retain him. Yeah, and like anything else in NIL, that stuff's really important. But guess what? It's week 1. It's college football season. I'm not worried about that stuff till December. I'm not even going through that level of stress right now. I love the wholesale changes on the D-line, 4 out. When 4 went out and 4 came in, it looked like a very hockey line change. I agree. Desmond Reed can play on Sundays, too. He's really quick and fast. I agree. I think Saul's got a couple tight wins this year. Oh, yeah. Jim, I'll tell you what. That 50-yard field goal that Ben Saul's hit, I mean, he hit the back of the net, halfway up the net. I mean, that was probably good from 60 yards. So we have ourselves a kicker. I think that's the biggest thing. We saw, obviously, Junko punt a couple times. I didn't see anything egregious out of him. I didn't think there was, horrific punts. I think he looked better. We'll see as that goes on, as the year goes on, if they have to punt more and more. I mean, he only punted so many times. I mean, Pitt was going down the field and scoring. That was a big thing. But overall, I was happy with the special teams as well. Cruz Brookins had him good game, first live college game. I agree. PJ Rambler, can someone please create a kick-ass football hype video? I agree. Will Francis Brayu play next week? It's a good question. I think he should be back next week, just through the middle of the week. Got a little dinged up. I don't think, it's nothing serious. I know that. I think he should be able to go. The plan is for him to go this week. That'll be another guy in this rotation, and he'll be another guy I think that plays really well. I'd have loved to have him be healthy just to get into this game this week, just to get some college reps. But he's going to be needed as we go forward. Obviously a freak in nature, but he's going to get thrown right into the fire, man. A P4 team in Cincinnati on the road. the River City rivalry. We'll need him this week. Hall of Fame College Football Podcast with Jason Watkins and Coach, my dude. What's going on, man? I found the fact that WVU fans basically no-showed the second half to be so funny for all the smack talk. They talk about attendance hypocrites. Yeah, I saw the crowd after that, man. There was a lot of guys missing. The student section, half of it was empty, like for the first portion of the first quarter. Then obviously, I would say for a normal fan base for that long of a delay, I understand fans leaving. But for a team like West Virginia that loves to talk about attendance, where, which is kind of funny to me. They talk about attendance a lot, but they only sold out one game last year, and it was Pitt. So if Pitt doesn't show up last year, they don't sell out any games. It was all between 43 and 50,000 last year. So they had 10,000 plus seats open every game last year besides Pitt. And the one thing I don't understand is, in my opinion, and I told people this, and I told people this on other shows that I join and I contribute on, the Fan Addict Sports, the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. I said to people that there was no chance that West Virginia would win, and I told people that. I will never understand why West Virginia made this like their ultimate Super Bowl. I will never understand that. This was more hype than like a backyard brawl game. All this stuff, and I think what really hurt West Virginia was all this hype of, from Neil Brown over the offseason. Oh, Garrett Green, he's getting disrespected. He's not getting the love he deserves. He looked horrible yesterday. I mean, West Virginia didn't do nothing. Scored one touchdown in the game. I mean, it was just really mediocre. And there's a lot of film out there right now. When Garrett Green got hit, man, he didn't want no more. I mean, Abdul Carter hit Garrett Green on that one fumble. Man, he was never going to go after another ball again. That was one thing I didn't understand either. So why they hyped it up so much, and then they just fell flat on their face on Fox on Big Noon Fox. I don't know. I didn't understand that. And I thought maybe the game would be competitive at some points, but it wasn't competitive at all. I mean, it was just, and even in the Neil Brown press conference, someone sent me some clips. Neil Brown even said, we were not prepared to play and we played horribly. Well, that's on you, buddy. I mean, you had all off season and you were hyping your team up the whole way through. And they wonder why they had, West Virginia placed in the middle of the Big 12. I mean, obviously if Penn State played the Big 12, Penn State's winning the Big 12. There's no questions asked there, but that's probably the best defense and the best team they'll face. But there are certainly question marks. Zach Frazier, one of the things I talked about the WVU fans, I'm like, Zach Frazier's not there anymore. That's a question mark. Brandon Yates had two horrible snaps that led to the one led to a turnover, but their O-line didn't look like what it did last year with now Zach Frazier and Doug Nestor. That's something that you have to look at. They were not getting pushed. I mean, there were times that really the majority of the time, West Virginia their O-line was getting pushed back. So there's a lot of stuff to look at, and I'll look through it again throughout the review of the tape. Brady, do you think Pat made a good decision with the quarterback? Brady, proof's in the pudding. I mean, 30 of 40, 333 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception, and that's without playing the full game. He probably plays a full game. He probably throws for 4 touchdowns or more. I think he did a great job, and I'm good to have a quarterback going forward. Talk is Pitt. I still think we beat Cincinnati this week. Like you said, Cincy has a bad defense, and I still think we can contain them. That'll be fun to see this week. Obviously, they tore it up last year in the first game. They've got, I will say this, they got a number of receivers on the outside. We'll have to do the same thing containing, obviously, the rushing portion of it. Evan Pryor, he only had 4 carries, but he had 2 big runs. The longest one he had was 64 yards. He rushed, for 4 carries, 105 yards, but the longest one he had was 64 yards. The rest of the time after that wasn't too much there. Corey Kiner's back again, 7 carries, 51 yards. Victor Dawson, 2 carries, 54 yards. So there were big chunk plays there you had there, but also, too, Xavier Henderson, a really good wide receiver. He had 7 receptions for 101 yards, a 14.4 average. Joe Royer, 5 receptions for 89 yards. Sterling Burkhalter, 2 catches for 70 yards, had a 61-yard catch. Aaron Turner, 2 catches for 68 yards. I think a lot of that stuff, I haven't reviewed the tape yet. I'll review it again. I'll go back and review this one, but, a lot of that was just big spurt plays. It's Towson. But the majority of the time, this game was close for a good period of time there. 20 at halftime, it was 28-17. So it was a tight ball game for a while there. You know, it was 21-3 at the end of the first, and then Towson scored 14 in the second. You know, became a close game towards the half. So, I mean, 28-17. It was a tight ball game going into the half. And then they finally broke away. Obviously, Cincinnati didn't score any points in the fourth quarter. They only scored 10 points in the second half overall, while they scored 28 points in the first half. A little concerning there. But overall, there are good players on this football team. But like you saw last year in the second half, you know, in the second game of the year, you know, they scored 28 points. A lot of it was because of the first half. Our rush defense just wasn't in their lanes. In the second half of that game, Pitt's defense, and especially rush defense, looked really, really good. You know, Brendan Sorsby, he was 22 of 31 for 383, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. It'll be fun to see how they do. Same thing last year. They did really well in the first game, but it just comes down to adjustments and how you really attack this offense. You know, going into it right now, FanDuel had a 2.5-point lead, or a 2.5-point advantage to a 2.5-point favorite for Cincinnati. I think that changes as we go through the week. But guess what? Pitt lives by this prove it. You have to prove it week in and week out. And that starts with practice and preparation every single day. Monday through Friday will tell you what you do on Saturday. It's that simple. And Pitt is in this prove it model right now, where I think it's perfect for this team. You got to prove it day in and day out. Any given Saturday, anybody can win. Doesn't matter what the records are, what's happening. That's all I know. And again, we faced Kent State. We didn't face Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Florida State, Georgia Tech. You know, we didn't face any of these teams. We faced Kent State. If I'm them, in terms of Pitt players, you're dialed in and focused, because guess what? It's now a P4 team. Time to find out what we really do, but more importantly, on the road. How do we adjust on the road? What's our communication like on the road? What's our commitment to corrections from week 1 to week 2? This is where the fun stuff starts to get in terms of coaching and player development. How much better do we get from week 1 to week 2? Pat Narduzzi talks about it all the time. Week 1 to week 2, you make your biggest adjustments. Let's see how well those adjustments are made. Last year, the adjustments weren't made there. They lost that game by only 6 points, 27-21. How much better does this team get to week 1 to week 2? And I'm confident in these coaches. I'm confident in these players. I know they're not satisfied. And from a number of the players that I've heard from, they went from the minute the game was over, it went from Kent State to Cincinnati. That's something you love to hear. That's called maturity. That's called not being satisfied. Getting after it, working your tail off to be better. That's what you love to see out of these players. Hey, Pittsburgh, go Pitt. Booing Kenny was ridiculous. I agree. Unrelated, but Zachariah Branch looks like an absolute freak for USC. Oh, wow. If I'm not watching it right now, I'll turn it on after the game, and then I'll watch a little bit of that and get back to film study. But let me know what the score is, obviously, between USC and LSU. We owe Cincinnati big time. Couldn't agree more. Dude leaves a cloud of smoke whenever he has the ball in his hands. Woo Pig. Chevy Troutman. Obviously, I think it's Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken. That's Arkansas, right? So we might have an Arkansas fan in here. SEC, good stuff, brother. We got my man in here. Maniac Razorback, big game this week. Let's get after it. Couldn't agree more. Again, if you're in here now, please subscribe to the channel. Again, here, as you've seen before, guys, we've had ACC, SEC, and also 2 Big Ten fans in here, man. I appreciate all the support. Again, it was so much fun meeting you guys, but so cool to talk to a number of the SEC fans and the Big Ten fans through the number of podcasts that I go on to and talk just college football in general. I'll start bringing up more of that stuff as we go on through the year, but really good stuff. Woo Pig. Go Arkansas, baby. We will beat Cincy. Paris Knight, my man. This team just feels different. They suddenly improve, and Big Brew will be playing. Excited to see the D-line development. I agree. I think Brayu should be back. I think it's a good thing. Again, another guy there in the interior defensive line. I expect him to have a big year. He'll be a big factor in what we do. And again, shout out to Anthony Johnson, hometown hero. I thought he had a good game, took up a lot of space, and made some really good plays in there and allowed plays to be made by the linebackers. Talkers Pitt, I think we end up beating Cincy in 2 possessions or more. Might be close to the first half, but Pitt moves away in the second. Cincinnati lacks depth. I'll see whenever I watch the film. ACC is shaping up to be interesting. .GT, Pitt, and even Cuse look solid so far. Virginia Tech hype training off the rails, losing to Vandy. I know, I agree with that, man. They're screwed there. Clutch North Carolina win, but lose their QB. Miami looks legit for once. Miami looks damn good. Beat the living breaks off of Florida yesterday in the swamp. It wasn't like it was in Miami. It was in the swamp. So that was a really good win by them. But again, like I said, ACC is a good conference. Number of good football teams in this conference overall, man. And I can tell you this, people were talking about Clemson. Oh, the game was only close for the first half. Broke away in the second half. Guys, I got news for you. Go watch the rest of the teams in the SEC. A lot of them aren't beaten Georgia, and Georgia's going to beat the brakes off of the majority of the SEC teams. Only teams I see keeping it close to Georgia are Bama. I would say Bama, and I'll put even maybe Mizzou up there, and that might be it. Oh, and Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss got a real good shot this year too with Lane Kiffin. I think he turns the tide this year. But the rest of them, they're going to get their tails beaten too. So I mean, what the hell? At least Clemson has shown they've won national titles. They've blown out Alabama in a national championship game. They've beaten these teams before. So it doesn't bother me too much. FYI, the two teams suing the ACC because they are better than the non-conference currently checks phone 0-2. Wolfman, I agree, brother. They are 0-2. And also, too, check in tomorrow. Boston College versus Florida State. Don't check me on this, but I'll tell you what. Boston College got a chance, baby. We'll see what Boston College has up their sleeve. It's down in Florida State, so we'll see. Ben Saul's going to be the next play special teams player. Shout out to them. Yep. Shout out Pitt NFL alumni kicker Fred Cox. Good stuff there. Line already moved to Cincinnati -1. Starting to move there. We'll see that going. I told you it'll move during the week. So Brock, I appreciate that update, brother. Jake Stark. I want to believe, but can you help me understand why this offense is different than Todd Graham's? We are hearing all the same buzzwords. Jake, I don't know, man. I don't think we're hearing any of the same buzzwords between Todd Graham. I think when you look overall, when you look between Todd Graham's offense and what we did yesterday, I think there's a stark difference. I think what you're looking at is a completely different level of creativity. I think Todd Graham's offense was very much structured in a way that it was all up-tempo, but we weren't coached the same way. There's too many procedure penalties, false starts. That was a big problem. I think that potentially in that realm, we didn't have as many good players. I think Tino Sinceri was just not that guy to run that offense. Also, we only saw a year of it. I think the coaching lacked there. Obviously, Mike Norvell was on that staff when he was there. Obviously, now the head coach of Florida State. We had some different guys in there, but just coached differently. Go look at, the same thing. I don't remember a game where we really blew up like that under Todd Graham, and it was a year. I think what you're looking now is a major depth. We got major depth, I think, on the offensive side of the football. I think these guys are coached different. I think it's a big difference. That's just me personally. When I look at both of those two teams, I think Cade Bell is much more creative, and Cade Bell runs a pro style. Really, it's really a spread with the passing game, and it's an NFL style with the running game. Todd Graham was just all over the place. I think just the lack of coaching and development was just rough to watch, and we didn't have the player personnel for that offense. And he was here only a year, and he left after a year because Steve Peterson lied. So I don't blame him for leaving there either. But Todd Graham doesn't actually have the greatest reputation. He's actually helping out down at TCU right now, from one of my friends told me in the coaching world. And from what I've been told too, he's not actually, he's not exactly a really good individual too. So I'm good with him. That doesn't help either, but that's why that stuff didn't work out. The lack of development, lack of coaching, and lack of players. Isn't Bobby Petrino back at Arkansas? He is, and he lit it up yesterday. Crazy what you do when you allow a guy to coach, which is pretty funny. He's back at Arkansas with Sam Pittman. I like Sam Pittman a lot, but he's on the hot seat this year. Arkansas, I think, has a real opportunity to bounce back this year with Bobby Petrino as the offense coordinator, and he can actually run his offense. Jimbo Fisher just didn't allow him to run his offense. That's why Jimbo Fisher is currently not a head coach and out of college football right now. He's eyeing to get back into the sport. But Arkansas's got a real chance to bounce back this year with Bobby Petrino back at the helm, and they played a real good football game yesterday and scored a lot of points. BJ Rambler, it didn't seem like our offensive pace was as fast as advertised. Well, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, brother. When we were snapping the ball at like 10 to 12 seconds, a lot of the times, but I think when they got to a certain point, I think that they kind of held back, and that kind of goes to my portion of you saw like 35% of the playbook. But then also, too, towards the end of the first quarter, there was like 8 seconds left. They end up handing the ball off to Desmond Reed, and he runs the ball for 33 yards. I remember sitting in the stands. I was like, "Oh, we're gonna go right to the end of the first quarter. Just let it go. 6 seconds left." They lined up, gave the ball to Desmond Reed, and he took off. They took the yardage. Cade Bell's aggressive. That's why I love it. 77 are in the room, but only 36 likes. Come on, man. Hit the like button. Thank you. 77 from YouTube, but overall, I think we're about 500 when you compare X and YouTube. If you haven't done so, please, yes, hit the like button. Real easy, guys. Hit the like button. Let me know your thoughts, but also, too, share this video. And again, guys, if you haven't done so, subscribe and like. Thank you. What was that one? Fraud, Graham was all talk. Yeah, you can tell Bell is the truth from Western Carolina. And again, we'll have to pay. If Cade Bell continues as up, we'll have to pay at the end of the year. So there'll be some teams trying to go after him. And again, Florida tried to get him last year. So, yeah, most Graham had was 44. Also, offensive personnel seems like they can run this offense on like 2021. Yeah, 2011. I'm sorry. Yes, I agree. Also, I love the aggressive going for on fourth downs. I agree. That was great to see, too. I think when you get to these P4 games, though, if you can take the points, take the points. That's the one thing I'd like to see. Well, we are after the hour mark, guys. Another great show. If you haven't done so, please subscribe and like the video. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. It's easy, free. Do it. Like it. Share this video on Facebook. Share this video and give me your thoughts. Love to hear the conversation from each one of you guys. The show is great because of you guys and what you do on a consistent basis. I'm beyond thankful for how well you guys support the show. Appreciate everything you guys do. And again, cannot wait for the Backyard Brawl to meet more people. If you're not an Alliance 412 member, sign up today. Do the basic minimum. The 1976, because that was the last time Pitt won a national title. 1976, which is $19.76 a month, will get you into the tailgate with Southern Tier. Man, it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be nice to meet all you guys there. If you haven't done so, become a member of Alliance 412 today. I will see you at that Alliance 412 tailgate. Talk to you guys one-on-one. Maybe give you guys some information I can't share on here. Some really good stuff behind the scenes about the team. But can't wait to see you guys. Guys, it's been another great episode of Talking College Football, as always. And Jim Diller, I appreciate this one here. Great show. Love how connected you are. Jim, I appreciate it. Love you guys. That's why I love connecting with each and every one of you guys. The show is great because of you guys. Another episode of Talking College Football is in the books. Guys, I cannot thank you enough for everything that you guys have done, and I can't appreciate it enough. But as always and forever, hail to Pitt and hail to the ACC. I'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the night. And also, hail to Pitt.